wow. That was a whole lot of nothing. I'm really racking my brain trying to come up with something even to say about what I just sat through. I don't hate this. I don't feel anger. I don't feel resentment. I just feel like they had me sit through a 2.5-hour movie for no good reason. There isn't enough in this movie to justify its own existence. It's one of those films, maybe even more so than any film I've ever seen, where it has that problem of being all plot and no story. And even the plot stuff doesn't really take place until, like, the second half of the film. I don't even know where to this movie reminds me of one of those video games, I'm sure the gamers out there will know what I'm talking about, where they put all of this extra stuff in the game for you to do, like tracking down flags or skulls or something, and there's like 100 of them scattered all over the place, and you gotta collect them, just to put more content in the game. And you're like, okay, it's extending the length of the game, I definitely have something to do here, but it doesn't really add to the substance of the game. That is exactly what this film is like. This movie is just lifeless. There's something that SF Debris said in his review of Star Trek Into Darkness that I think applies here. I think he said it eloquently. When he said that there was a lot of activity in the film, but not a whole lot of movement. That applies much more so in this film, I think, than even in Star Trek Into Darkness. There's just nothing here. The first hour or so of this film is dedicated to Clark's backstory, or Superman's backstory, or Kal-El's backstory, however you want to look at this. We go through a series of flashbacks and flash forwards, kind of like we did in Batman Begins, except in Batman Begins it was good. Here, it's all over the place. These flashbacks and flash forwards, they happen so randomly and in places that are just so out of place that it really takes you out of the film. It's really difficult to even remember when this is supposed to be or what's going on, because it's so damn random. And the flashbacks that we see with Clark dealing with his abilities and dealing with the fact that he's not like us, it's not all that different from the first Superman film, except in the first Superman film, there were about 2 or 3 scenes like that. Here, there's freaking 1,000,000 of them, and they're not all that interesting, and they're not all that different. And it just is certainly not different enough to justify this being another movie. It just felt like a very different-looking version of the first film a lot of the time, except the first film actually got on with itself. Basically, the first half of this film is everything that happened in the first half of the first film, except it takes forever for anything to get going. There was one thing they did, one thing that actually got my attention and made me think, wow, I've never seen this approach to Clark's backstory before, and that's when Clark is a little kid, and he's in school, and this is before he learned how to control his super abilities, so now they're just happening outside of his control, and he's seeing through everyone. Everyone looks like he's looking at them through an X-ray. He can hear everything. He can't isolate anyone's voice or any of the noise, and it's freaking him out, and he runs out of the classroom and locks himself in a closet. I think that is exactly what would happen if you were a little kid who didn't know what was going on, and suddenly that started happening to you. That was a very original approach. Everything else was just a retread, and it's something that we saw, I feel at least, in the original Superman film, and even a whole lot of things that we saw in Superman Returns, which was really, really terrible. This is just kind of been there, done that, more of the same, and I didn't see the justification for even making that another film. Where this film starts to be different is towards the second half, and this is where we get into a whole lot of the sci-fi alien stuff Because yes, there are other Kryptonians in this. It kind of harkens back to Superman 2. Not really a whole hell of a lot. Superman 2 was much, much better than this. The alien stuff is very generic, and I thought actually very dumb looking. I don't know if this was anything like what it was in the comics, because I never read them. I just thought it looked really ridiculous on screen a lot of the time. I'm talking about just the alien technology and the way it worked. Not that that's a big thing, but for whatever it's worth, I thought that was silly. So this second half is where the plot stuff starts happening, and once again, this is going to be a film where I'm going to spoil a lot of this, even though there really isn't a whole hell of a lot to spoil here. But if you just want to go in completely fresh, turn the review off now. This guy comes back named Emperor Zod, who he and his crew were sort of stranded before Krypton was destroyed, and now they're free, and now they're going to come to Earth, and the reason they're on Earth is really complicated and really stupid. Essentially, they want to track down this codex that Superman has. I think it was called a codex, whatever. It's this thing that has the DNA code of all the Kryptonians, and he wants to use that to make another Krypton on Earth. He wants to terraform Earth and make it another Krypton, and use that codec whatever thingy to resurrect all the Kryptonians. First of all, I'm wondering why he needed to do that on Earth. I mean, the whole thing centered around, oh no, you can't do this because the Earth is going to be destroyed. And he's like, I don't care about Earth. I want to make Krypton. I'm like, there's a ton of other planets in this solar system, dude. I mean, you're going to a lot of trouble. Why don't you just do this on another planet? Maybe they actually did address that and I just missed it. I've only seen this once. But I didn't understand why it just had to be on Earth. Regardless, that's the overplot. That's what he's trying to do. Now, you're probably ahead of me on this problem. The villain wants to do something nefarious to destroy the Earth, and Superman has to stop him. I am so tired of watching this plot in every single movie. I mean, making the fate of the world the thing that's at stake, that's fine. But every time this plot is worked in, it's always the most generic, roundabout way possible, where there's a bad thing that's going to happen, and the good thing has to overcome it, and not much more in between. There's no real narrative here other than that. It's just a generic sci-fi plot. And I guess that's kind of one of my passive problems is, while I guess that setup is fine, there's nothing that really makes this movie special. And there's nothing that really makes it stand out, even from the other Superman films. Certainly not the first two. The first two Superman films were really, really good. This just feels like, God, I said it about Into Darkness, I'm going to say it here, it feels like a dead retread. Now, one of the things that I will give them credit for is you have these moments in the films where there are these super people fighting, having these really long battles that seem to last forever, but I felt like they got the scale of that conflict absolutely right. I felt like as we were seeing all these super guys knocking each other around all over the place and everything is getting destroyed and people are getting hurt in the process, you really did get the sense that Earth and humanity was very fragile in the wake of those conflicts and in the wake of those people. And you really felt like even when they're doing something as chaotic as just having a brawl, these guys are really dangerous. And even Clark or Superman trying to save the Earth is very dangerous because a lot of people could get hurt in that fight. I thought they did that very well. The scope of those battles were really good. A lot of the time, however, I didn't really understand why the fights needed to be there. Like, for example, they're trying to get that whatever codec thingy, and it turns out that Superman doesn't have it. So then Zod is kind of subdued because he gets his helmet damaged and he goes away. But then the other Kryptonian guys stay there and just pound the crap out of Superman for what felt like forever. I didn't know how that was going to get them the codec thing. I didn't know why they were still there. They could have just gone back to the ship and tried to find the thing. It really just felt like just an aside to show us special effects, which were admittedly entertaining. I just didn't see what any of this had to do with any kind of a story. Another problem with the fights in this film is that while I do admit that they were very entertaining, it was really difficult to gauge what kind of an effect they were having. These guys are just getting knocked around all over the place. They're having things slammed into them. They're just beating the crap out of each other. And I couldn't tell if during these fights Superman was like an inch from death, or if you could just pound on him and pound on him all day and it wouldn't make any difference. I didn't know what the remainder of the threat was, because it looked to me like they were just bouncing off everything like it was nothing. So I think if they do another film, which I'm sure they will, they might want to make that just a little bit more clear. And so basically what I just described is pretty much everything that happens for the rest of the film. Like basically the whole last half of the film. It's fight, 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 exposition, exposition, fight. It calls back to that line from SF Debris. Lots of activity, no movement. It really didn't feel like they had any kind of a story or any kind of a character to really develop in all of this. It was just it all seemed to be about showing us Superman do things just to keep the movie on. And then the film ends on a very open-ended note to where they can do other films, which I guess is what a good reboot should. But this is probably the worst reboot, just reboot, that I've ever seen, because all the other reboots, like The Amazing Spider-Man and especially Batman Begins, however you feel about The Amazing Spider-Man, it was a pretty decent self-contained film. This just feels like such a waste of time, and it feels like there was so much potential in the end to where they're saying, okay, now we're going to start to make the films, where you just want to say, okay, get on with it already. We sat through nothing for you to set this up to make something else. Hurry up and make that something else, because I have to believe that the film they do after this is going to be better than this. I do not see the reason to watch this film. I'm not entirely sure what his name is, but the person they got to play Superman did a very good job. I actually kind of liked the Lois Lane in this, certainly more than in Superman Returns. Lawrence Fishburne? He's Lawrence Fishburne. He's kind of a dead piece of wood. Didn't really notice him back there in the background. And that Emperor Zod guy, man, I really hope they're done with him. I suspect that they are, because I heard that even from like the fans of the comic books, Emperor Zod, who I guess is in the comic books, I don't know, I've never read them, but he got a negative reception in this film. Boy, are you guys not kidding. That guy was asleep. Ugh. Terrible villain. Just completely worthless. I don't know what else to say. There is just so much dragging of the feet in this film, if you follow me. If you're a Superman fan and you're a fan of the comics, maybe there's something here that you guys know that I don't. I just know that I did think that the first two Superman films were very good films. Didn't care for the rest of them. 3 and 4 were garbage. Superman Returns was pretty much garbage. But I think that Superman really isn't my thing, and I think that this was the chance to show how this could be my thing, and I think that chance was lost. I don't think this is for me. I really don't think that this is a very good film on its own, but it really just reinforces the fact that I don't think Superman is all that interesting, and this didn't do anything to change my mind about that. Scale of 1 to 10, 3. It is a very passive 3, though. I really don't feel anything for what I just sat through. It's just a waste of time. I, for one, feel like whether it was sitting here and watching paint dry or just staring off into space, I would have had something better to do than sit through that movie for 2.5 hours. I don't feel any animosity towards this film. I don't have any hatred for it. I just think it was a complete waste. I like Christopher Nolan. I like David Goyer. I think they missed on this one. So that's really all I have to say. I haven't really checked on the reception of this film. I did see in a couple of the tweets that I guess Doug Walker didn't like it. I don't know why. Maybe I'll go check out why. Maybe it was for some of the same reasons. How did you guys feel about it? How is this movie doing? Do you think that this is going to breathe new life into a new franchise, or do you think that they kind of dropped the ball? I'm actually I'm actually really curious. This isn't one of those films where I'm taking a stand against something I think is bad, and I think everybody should agree and stay away from it. I'm kind of looking at this more from a step back approach. I know how I feel, but I'm really curious to see where this goes. You know, they got Batman so absolutely right. Do you guys think that they're getting Superman absolutely right, or do you think that this really was just a retread and you're just going to stick with the best of the original films? Let me know, because I am really curious. And until next time, hope I get a better movie next time. But until next time, I will see you all in World War Z.